Is the octopus your favorite species in the ocean? Because this is the episode for you. We're going to be talking to Sy Montgomery, author of a new book, Secrets of the Octopus, and Warren Carlyle, who's a co-author on that, and he is the founder and he runs OctoNation, which is huge around the internet. I'm a big fan of OctoNation, and I've been a part of that for quite some time because octopuses are pretty cool. We're going to be talking about how OctoNation got started, how Sy Montgomery got to be an author, and why she's authored over 38 books. We're going to be talking about all of that and the secrets of the octopus on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. And this is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about a lot of different things that includes communication, what's going on in the ocean, and how you could protect the ocean all in one episode. And we're doing that through interviewing Sy Montgomery, who is a esteemed author, New York bestseller, multiple times. Warren Carlyle, who's the founder of OctoNation, the world's largest octopus fan club. And we're introducing the new book, Secrets of the Octopus, which was published by National Geographic. Recently, it's out now, but it just got published March 19th, 2024. So we're going to be talking about that book, how these two collaborated, how they met, and what and how it all brought them, how Octopus brought them together. Their love and passion for octopuses brought them together. So we're going to be talking to them in just a sec. Before we do, though, if you want to find out more things about octopus, and if you want to find out more things about the ocean and conservation, please sign up to the newsletter, or Speak Up for Blue newsletter. All you have to do is go to speakupforblue.com/newsletter. That's speakupforblue.com/newsletter. You get 5 days a week. You get a message to your inbox right away, all about the latest news, latest job offers or job ads, and a little something about our latest episodes in our Speak Up for Blue network. So check that out, speakupforblue.com/newsletter. And here's the interview with Sy Montgomery and Warren Carlyle talking all things octopus, Secrets of the Octopus, and OctoNation. And enjoy. I will talk to you after. Hey, Sy. Hey, Warren. Welcome to the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Are you ready to talk about not only OctoNation, but Secrets of Octopus and all things octopus?
We're ready.
Let's get cracking.
I love it. I am so excited because not only are we talking about the release of another book on octopus, but we're also talking about OctoNation, which I've been a fan of for quite a long time on Facebook. It's grown immensely. And I just love to see that because octopuses need love too. And we need to spend more time talking about that. And that's what we're going to do today. But first, before we get started, why don't we just get to know you two a little bit more? So Sy, we'll start with you. Why don't you just let us know who you are and what you do?
I'm an author. This is, I think, my 38th book, all on nature and animals and our relationships with them.
That's amazing. That's awesome. 38 books. Congratulations. And Warren, how about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Warren Carlyle. I founded OctoNation, the largest octopus fan club. And I always tell people I'm like the PR agent for the octopus. And I work in their administrative offices on land because everybody always wonders, like, how often do you get to interact with them? And I'm like, they keep me busy working for them in their back office. So there's always something going on. And so, yeah, we have a lot of fun here.
That's awesome. Now, both of you obviously are very nature focused. Sy, you mentioned you write about nature. What got you into writing about nature in the first place?
Well, gosh, I think I kind of came out of the womb like this. Before I was 2 years old, my parents took me to the Frankfurt Zoo in Germany. I was born in Germany. And I toddled away. And by the time they found me, I was in the hippo pen.
Oh, my Lord.
So I have always, the hippos were fine. I was fine. My mother never got over it. But I've always felt very at home with other animals. And I've always been attracted to the sea, but being a terrestrial vertebrate, I had up until March of 2011 when I began my love affair with octopuses, I had mostly written about vertebrate animals and animals that lived on land, because that's who I am. But most of life, as you well know, most animals are invertebrates and they don't live on land, they live in the sea.
That's true. That's very true. Now, what got you into the form of like writing about them? There's lots of ways you could have, interacted with nature, go through the science route, go through, sustainable businesses, explorer, but you decided to write books on them. And what made you follow that path? Have you always had a love for books?
Oh, yes, absolutely, but not as much as for animals. But when I was learning to read, I was born in 1958, so I'm learning to read in the 1960s, and my father is helping me to read the newspaper. My father was commander of MTMTS in Brooklyn. He was a brigadier general, and he would show me the articles in the New York Times that he knew would interest me because they were
Right.
about animals. Well, what were all the stories about in the 1960s that were about animals? They were all about how they're all going extinct. They were all about how, the eagles that were on his shoulder as a bird colonel, how the whales, the largest creatures that ever lived, how elephants, mighty elephants, they were all disappearing. And why? Because we humans were doing it inadvertently. And it was then when I was learning to read that I decided that I might be able to help more animals as a writer than I could as a veterinarian, which was really the only other thing that, a young child in the 50s
Right.
would think of to do with their life. And so that's what I have done.
And what would you say the tone of your books? How do you approach your books? What do you hope people get out of like the books that you've written in the past?
Love and
Mm.
awe. I want to introduce people to these amazing creatures who think and feel and know. And I find often they connect best with animals who they can relate to as individuals. So I'm known as kind of an immersive
Hmm.
journalist. I tend to, I love going to the library and I love interviewing people, um, and I love watching videos and cranking microfilm. But what I love best is going into the field and getting to know creatures one on
Mm.
one. And uh, with Octopus, I began doing that in March of 2011, the first time I ever actually touched a living octopus and looked into her face.
Now, was this on a dive, or was it at an aquarium, or how did you have that first interaction with an octopus?
This was at an aquarium. I went to New
Mm.
England Aquarium in Boston, and I asked the keeper to lift the lid on the tank containing Athena, this glorious 40-pound adult female giant Pacific octopus. And I had no idea what to
Hmm.
expect. And I saw her beautiful silvery eye lock onto my face. I saw this huge, magnificent creature unfurl her gelatinous
Right.
body from her lair and stretch out like a big red silk scarf in the water. And then I saw her arms coming up through the water, reaching for me. And so naturally, I wanted to reach out to her. And I asked, Scott, is it okay? Can I touch her? And Scott said, sure. So I plunged my arms in there. And soon my skin was covered with dozens of soft, questing suckers. And she was tasting me as well as
Hmm.
feeling me. And I knew I was going to have to go home and explain to my husband why I was covered with hickeys now.
So she got to know you quite well, I guess you could say.
Oh my gosh. Well, if a person starts tasting you that early in your relationship, it's kind of creepy, but this was an octopus and this is one of the ways they know their world. And what struck me was here was someone, not just something. This was someone who was just as interested in me as I was in her, that she was curious, she was alert, she was on it. And it was that interaction that began this love affair in 2011 that continues
To
to
this
this
day.
day, and one that we're sharing with all of your listeners and folks who will be watching the Secrets of the Octopus film and reading the new Secrets of the Octopus book, and folks in
I
OctoNation.
love it. I absolutely love it. Now, speaking of OctoNation, Warren, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of how did you get interested in the oceans, in octopus, and then how it all began with OctoNation in 2015.
Yeah, so it all started when I was younger. I had a very similar experience to Sy when interacting with an octopus for the first time. I was on a field trip for school, and we were supposed to walk single file and not really touch anything, and just kind of like walk through. And I remember seeing an octopus, and remember locking eyes with it. And I have two German shepherds, so I say, kind of like when you are like with your dogs, you can kind of like tell when they need to go outside or they need to
Yeah.
eat, or so like you can tell with the octopus is like it's eerily that same feeling from the standpoint of you're like, oh, what's going on? Like you like feel prompted to ask it a question. Um, and I remember as a neurodivergent kid, I'm ADHD, I'm diagnosed with autism at a very young age. I made flashcards for everything I was interested in. And so I went to the library, and there are no books really on octopus. There
Right.
was like an encyclopedia, and you could learn about the giant Pacific octopus, but there wasn't anything. And so then I went to the bigger library, again, just no books. And I remember thinking at that young age, being like, why are there so many books about all these other animals, and yet there's none on this one? And so when people would ask me, what's your favorite animal? I would just say the octopus, the octopus. And it wasn't until 2015 comes out, and at the time, I'm working in New York. I'm working with as a studio manager for a celebrity fashion photographer. I'm learning influencer marketing. I'm learning all these different
Interesting.
things.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any. I was like, to what end? Like, what am I doing all of this for? And it wasn't until I picked up Sy's book, actually, that I thought she talks about in the first 3 pages, if you read Sullivan Octopus, that octopuses were demonized throughout Western culture. They have never had a really good PR agent. And I remember thinking, oh, that's what I want to do. Like, that's what I've always wanted to do, is like talk about the octopus in a way that is awe-inspiring. And Sy kind of gave me that permission with no background in marine biology, with no background in anything that had anything to do with the oceans. And I felt called to start taking a journalistic approach and writing about my favorite animal, and writing about it in a way that people could understand and that I could learn more about it. I never felt empowered to do that before, because I thought, no, you need to be a scientist. You have to be a marine biologist.
Right. Right.
And so I just took a journalistic approach and started covering different species all over the world, and in a way that was empowering, in a way that made it seem as if they were superheroes, that they
Mm-hmm.
existed in every ocean, they're along every coastline. Depending on where they live, they have a unique adaptive trait or superpower that allows them to be masters of their environment. And it started taking off, and people started noticing. And people were saying, this is the first time I've ever heard of this creature. This is the first time I've ever heard of this animal. I didn't know this existed. And I kept getting that over and over again. And I just kept thinking, I'm onto something. And then I started working with underwater photographers, with scientists, with artists, with tattoo artists, with, so many different people, and really reshaping the way that the world kind of perceived this animal at scale, because I could online. And so that's how it started, and it turned into a nonprofit by accident, honestly, because people kept asking me, how can I give you money? They thought I was a nonprofit. And I was like, no, this is just something I do in my free time. Uh,
Right.
and then I realized how many different resources that I could create. I like, the more and more I looked into it, the more and more I was like, why don't underwater photographers have species guides with like identifying markers? And I was like, nobody's creating it. So I was like, so I guess
Right.
I'll create it. I guess
Yeah.
and then Octopedia, I was like, why isn't there an online comprehensive field guide of octopus species? It didn't exist. And I was like, I guess I'll create it. So I just started creating and feeling empowered to create all these resources that didn't exist. And now we're over 1 million members. Our content seen by over 500 million people last year. And we're publishing a book with Sy Montgomery, New York Times bestselling author. So it truly is a full circle moment. Like, this book represents a love story between the octopus and us, but also Sy and me, and what a mentor can do for, if you're reading a book, that you have power, to inspire somebody and to let them lead in your footsteps. And that's kind of what I've done with Sy is I'm holding a microphone to her book, The Soul of an Octopus, and showcasing how she's able to enamor people with the way she talks about animals, but at scale through OctoNation.
That's amazing. There's a couple of times in your story I'm just like, you make it sound easy because you've done it and you've already put in the time. But let's break it down a little bit here. You're talking about creating all these resources, field guides and things online. Were you doing this full time when you first started before it became a nonprofit, or was this was just like your hobby? This was like it consumed you kind of thing, and this is what you did because
Yes.
that
So
takes a lot of time to do.
yeah, so the blessing and curse of being autistic and neurodivergent is we obsess, about certain things,
Gotcha.
about problems, about solving problems, and we oftentimes, I can't speak for everybody because it's obviously very specific and there's high
Right.
functioning and but for me, I would say that prior to like alongside OctoNation, I created my own brand management agency, and so I kind of like was a brand manager, but for humans.
Yeah.
And so I was able to build and scale brands by simplifying messaging and by being able to communicate certain problems that people were having, and like that's what I would do for the
Yeah.
octopus. It was interesting because I had to do that same thing. I had to like when I first started, I was like, okay, I need to reverse engineer the attention span of somebody who self-identifies as being interested in the octopus, who is currently serving that person. And
Right.
then how do they then learn about OctoNation? And then so I took a very like strategic approach to everything that I did. And when it came to creating resources, I thought, okay, I don't have the resources to create this, and I don't have the knowledge. And so I had been learning about octopuses, but I didn't know everything. It wasn't like now where I've been learning about them for 10 years and writing about them for that long. And so I started partnering up with science communicators, with writers. We have a scientific advisor in OctoNation, Dr. Chelsea Bennis, who's a student of Roger Hanlon's. And I started kind of building up our, what would people would think us as legit, like other than this like fly by night autistic organization, you know, who can I lay the foundation with to make this make sense for people? And I just started filling in all the blanks. So I guess taking a very strategic approach to everything that I do.
Yeah, and I think that's really good, to really talk about that because it's one of those things where you're building all this content. You know how to do it. You know how to brand, the octopus and
Mhm.
OctoNation, which is great because you've been learning it all the way through and you've been seeing how influencer marketing has been working. And but this your influencer is it's you, but through octopuses, right? And
Mhm.
and putting it to today's technology, I think 2015, 16, 17, we really started to see an increase in social media, sort of that creator economy sort of
Mhm.
taking over. And um, I think that's great. And you must have made a lot of contacts, in the octopus world to be able to get all that information. I've talked to shark scientists and biologists and science communicators. I've talked to whale biologists and so forth. All these different groups. They always say that the shark world is small, the whale world is small, the dolphin world is small. How big is the octopus world when you're looking out, reaching out to? I mean, you have Sy obviously, who's
Mhm.
writing about the majestic beauty of these animals and really inspiring people to fall in love with them. But from like a science perspective or just from a content creation perspective, when you reached out, did you find it was easy to reach out to scientists and other people who know a lot about octopus to help you create that content or help you build that content? Was it a small world or was it easy to navigate through?
Initially it was hard, I would say, because I had like no credibility. I had, hey, I'm really interested in this thing.
Right.
Do you want to contribute? And who I found, the people who wanted to contribute the most were underwater photographers that were all over the world that were trying to get
Ah,
published through larger institutions. They wanted their footage to get licensed. They wanted their photos to be seen by people because it's almost imagine like you have a photo of a species of octopus that nobody's seen before. And because the larger organizations are typically more broad, like Nat Geo can publish an octopus, but it's like on Nat Geo on their Instagram, they can't publish an octopus every other day. Like that's not ever
True.
going to happen for
True.
them. And so for OctoNation, what I found was all of the underwater photographers wanted so badly for their work to be seen, and we created a way in which for them to showcase their footage. But another thing that they didn't know was some of them didn't even know what they were looking at. Some
Right.
of them were like, is this a species that exists? Because I can't find online. The information is not connected in a way. And what I found was when I would look at underwater photography, I remember for the first 2 years, I would go on Instagram and I would just look at the hashtag octopus. And I found that more than half of the species were misidentified.
Right.
And
Makes
so I would
sense.
reach out and be like, hey, by the way, this is a day octopus. Hey, by the way, this is a California two spot. Hey, by the way, this is a, and they were just like, thank you for telling me, by the
Yeah.
way, who are you and what do you do? And so I started building up a lot of relationships with underwater photographers and just said, hey, can I take your content and take a journalistic approach to it and educate our community at scale about what they're looking at?
Yeah.
And a lot of them, said yes in the beginning. And now it's gotten to the point where if we share an underwater photographer on OctoNation, they immediately get reached out to by production companies wanting to license their footage and content.
Wow.
So it kind of creates an ecosystem in which being featured is a direct, correlation to their footage getting licensed almost immediately.
Well,
So it's cool that we've created that ecosystem.
so, yeah, and it's great too that you can help promote their work, which I think is great. So it helps you and educate people. It helps them get potentially, like you said, reached out to get licensed for the work that they've
Mhm.
done. I think that's a really great thing, and building that trust really helps too, because a lot of people, I mean, you look with AI now, you look with just the way images are shared right now, you have to be very careful of who you share, and of course the creators of that content have to be careful and not getting all their images posted. So you must have built a lot of trust with those underwater videographers and photographers to share their
Yeah,
images
and
and
we
videos.
and we did our first ever international octopus photography competition with the Explorers Club of New York, which was, we had Sy was a judge, we had David
Nice.
Dubois, we had a lot of really well-known people, and I just couldn't believe that it was the first time anybody ever thought to do a competition just on octopuses. But then I
Right.
remembered, wait a minute, all of these photographers were not connected before, like they didn't know each other existed. Now it's gotten to the point where I'm like, oh, if somebody reaches out to me, I'm like, oh, Magnus Lundgren has the most beautiful blanket octopus footage. Ben
Right.
Trainer in Indonesia has
Just
the
know
most
them.
beautiful coconut octopus footage. But nobody
Yeah.
was really communicating at scale to octopus or cephalopod photographers. So we kind of created that ecosystem.
And you've built such a cool organization. It really is. It's a lot of fun. There's just, when you go on like I'm in the Facebook group, go on the site, it's just fun conversations that happen. And I think it's great. Now, we're here to talk about the book as well, Secrets of the Octopus. How did both of you, you kind of mentioned a little bit, Warren, that you met Sy, but Sy, when did you first start interacting with Warren, and again, and how did that lead to this book being written?
Well, Warren came to Boston, and I said, well, let's meet an octopus together. And so we got our hands in the tank, and that was Sy that you first met, wasn't it? There was this octopus named
That is
after me,
awesome.
which was like the best thing. And she was a terrific octopus. You don't want to be named after the one octopus that never comes out from behind the filter. But she was a real interactive sweetheart, and it was one of those things, when I met Warren, he was the real
Mhm.
deal. And the fact that he was starting OctoNation, I really believed in it from the
Mhm.
start. And I've got to tell you, Soul of an Octopus, no one thought that book would become an international
Right.
bestseller. No one thought that. The publisher did not think that. They did not give me a book tour, but I paid someone to do a book tour. And before I came back from the book tour, it had just taken off. No one thought a book about an octopus would be a finalist for a prestigious literary
Right.
award. It was a finalist for the National Book Award, which is unheard of. This is the story of the little octopus that could. No one thought that you could found an organization on this gelatinous animal that was portrayed as a monster throughout Western history and art that would attract 500 million viewers to its content. Even Warren's own brother said, shouldn't you pick something that's going extinct? Isn't there something else? So anyway, Warren and I have been friends ever since that moment that we met each other. And of course, every once in a while, he would invite me to address the nation, which always impressed my husband. Oh, I'm addressing the nation. So when National Geographic called me and told me that they were going to do a Secrets of the Octopus book and 3-part TV series, and asked me if I would write that book for them. One of my first thoughts was, yeah, I'll write it, but let's get OctoNation involved. And so Warren, actually, he's in the introduction when I write about, why octopuses, why now, why this book. And he actually wrote all of the species profiles in the back. There's, as you know, more than 300 known species of octopus. And they range from little tiny guys who could fit on the tip of your finger to 300-pound giant Pacific octopus. He just picked a handful of them to highlight. But he also helped with getting the photographs together for this thing.
Right.
And he was pivotal for the whole deal, and it made it even more fun for me, I've got to say.
Well, I can imagine. I mean, just to be able to add that, I guess the species description to it, right, and profile some of your favorite species. Is that how you did it, Warren? Like, how did you prioritize which octopuses would be in the book?
So I definitely chose ones that that most people knew about. You have to have the giant Pacific, you have to have the blue ringed, you have to have the common octopus. But then I started thinking about introducing species in which could really inspire, wonder. Like you think of the blanket octopus, who has this 6-foot long iridescent cape, who spends her whole entire life floating through the open ocean and never touches the sea floor. Yeah, she's right there. And when it's time for her to lay her eggs, she'll sprout out of her, almost like where her abdomen is or whatever, these biological stalks of like calcium carbonate. And she just grows them like Jack and the Beanstalk, and then attaches her eggs to them and kind of like just keeps on swimming and, can rip off the stinging tentacles of the man-o-war and protect herself, almost like nunchucks. And I thought there's so many interesting species that have never been introduced to like people at this scale. And with National Geographic as a partner, when they say everywhere books are sold, they mean it. This book is going to be in every single bookstore. It's going to be, they're already translating it into multiple different languages. So I thought this is such a great opportunity to just, instead of talking about, again, going back to me as a kid, the common octopus and the giant Pacific, how can we introduce these like little love stories where people go, I want to learn more. I want to go and I want to learn more about different species and figure out what their superpowers are, and I want to discover more content. So I tried with each profile to almost be like, okay, what's the next one? What's the next one? There's been so many people who've told me, they're just like, I could read a whole book on octo profiles. I'm like, that's the point. We want that. We want another book. We want another book where we're talking about more octopuses in different ways, and they should want that. And I think I'm excited for that.
What for both of you, and Sy, we'll start with you. Writing these books on octopuses probably generates a lot of questions from your readers. And Warren, I'll ask you the same thing. But we'll start with Sy. Like, what are the most common questions people ask about octopuses? And then did you take those questions and sort of try to answer them in the book, like in the way it was written?
Well, the questions that are answered in Secrets of the Octopus are more my questions that formed when I was getting to know octopuses personally in Soul of an Octopus. After I wrote Soul of an Octopus, the kinds of questions I would get was, how can I meet an octopus? That was very common. Right. And after that book came out, many aquariums started offering opportunities for people to actually go behind the scenes and meet an
Oh, that's cool.
octopus, which is kind of
Yeah.
cool. And the thing that's cool about it is that these animals, they're very smart, they love to explore, and they enjoy having stuff to do. There is an octopus handbook that every zoo and aquarium has, suggesting ways to keep your octopus occupied because they'll get
Yes.
bored. And if someone as smart as an octopus gets bored, things aren't going to go well for you. They will flood the entire floor by taking their tank apart. They will find a tiny hole and crawl out of it and create havoc. So better that your octopus has something to do. Some aquaria actually have taught octopuses to paint by pulling different levers, and then they sell the artwork. One aquarium, I think in New Zealand, taught their octopus to take photographs by sticking their arms into these little tubes. But anyway, that was one of the most common questions was, how can I get to meet an octopus? Another, people worried that octopuses so smart, how can you keep them in captivity? And that was a question that I answered with this. A mother octopus, a giant Pacific octopus, lays 100,000 eggs, and all but 2 of those are going to be eaten alive, generally torn limb from limb. And there's also a fishery for these animals. So the octopus that wins the lottery, I guess, gets to live out its life without being killed and have octopus babies. But second prize in that lottery is a lucky octopus that lives in an aquarium with everything he might want, including stuff to do, interesting toys, interesting visitors, etc. But while I was working on Soul of an Octopus, there had been people working on octopus science for many years, and in some cases they were toiling in relative obscurity. We are now in what Warren and I have been calling the golden age of octopus exploration and scientific research. And so much new science has been uncovered since 2015, when my first book came out. Secrets of the Octopus is showcasing this exciting new science in 3 areas. One, in their ability to camouflage themselves. And by camouflage, I don't just mean blend into the background, but there are octopuses who assume alternate identities. They don't just want to hide from their predators. Sometimes they want to be able to sneak up on their prey.
Right.
And they might do that by looking like an entirely different organism. There's the mimic octopus, who mimics all different kinds of critters, and one of them is a flounder. He does the flounder imitation so successfully that other flounders will swim after him. Amazing stuff. So camouflage was one of the areas that we looked at. The second I called gelatinous geniuses, and this was about their intelligence. And the third part was the one that allowed me to really examine a mystery that had intrigued but flummoxed me the whole time I was making friends with octopuses at New England Aquarium, and even in the wild when I would meet octopuses. And that was, why do they want to have anything to do with me? Why do these octopuses seem to be happy to see me and want to play with me? They were all thought to be solitary, with few exceptions. So the third part is called Octopus Kingdom, and it's looking at the relationships that octopuses have with their fellow octopuses. They don't always just gather to mate or cannibalize each other. Sometimes they live in octocondos. Sometimes they live in octocities. One is called Octopolis in Australia, and there's another one called Octatlantis. And sometimes they will form partnerships with other creatures. such as fish. And they will go hunting together, like you might go hunting with your hunting
Right.
dog, or if you're a falconer with a hawk, or like Maharajas used to go coursing with cheetahs. And there's actually fish who will go up to an octopus, stand on their head as a signal, saying, "Okay, Octo, I got an idea. Let's go hunting together. I know where we should go." And the octopus understands that signal,
Unreal.
follows the fish. The fish points out some little crevice that, as a bony creature, it cannot get in. The octopus just pours itself in there, and out comes this delicious meal that they can both enjoy. And that was unheard of. I mean, in 2011, when I began researching this, everyone thought almost all octopus species were completely solitary unless they were mating. And even mating was dangerous because it was not infrequent that it turned into a dinner date, literally.
Yeah. It's a tough world to be an octopus sometimes, and but it's also a fascinating world too. I mean, I've seen videos where, you know, octopuses are hunting with fish, and then all of a sudden they just like hit them and be like, "Get out of my way!" You know, that this is mine.
Oh, that's right, the one that punched him. And didn't you wonder, you know, what was going on there? Was this octopus just a jerk, or was the fish a slacker? And maybe the octopus was like, "Come on, get with it. Don't just laze around." We don't really know, but I love that. And I also love the video that was taken in Octopolis. Just like human neighborhoods, sometimes your neighborhood is just so irritating you could fling shells at them. And there's that fabulous video of an octopus getting annoyed at its neighbor, just throwing a handful of shells. And they hit him too. And that's hard to do underwater.
Love it. I think it's fantastic. Now, Warren, you've interacted with you know, millions of people through OctoNation. What kind of questions do you get, or maybe even myths that you have to bust quite often just through those questions?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I always tell people the cool thing about OctoNation is that I've read, you know, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of comments over the past decade. And so I've gotten a perspective from just like everyday people, like what they're curious about. And they're curious about things like, you know, will an octopus bite me? You know, will it try to drown me? You know, you know, they have all these very, you know, simple questions too, like, but it's been interesting over the years to see that perception shift. And then also what has been really fun too is seeing people say, well, not all octopuses XYZ, because there's so many different species, and there's so many different mating habits, and there's so many different that you can't say, well, all octopuses are XYZ. Like with Sy mentioning, a lot of times people thinking octopuses are really solitary. It's like we're discovering species that aren't solitary at all. Actually, they cohabitate. You know, so it's been really fun, kind of getting to introduce them. And there's certain people that are just like, oh, I don't like octopus, and that's when I go, oh, you just haven't found the species that is for you. Because if you think they're weird or ugly looking, it's like, have you seen a flapjack octopus? You know, that has these flappy ears and looks like a little, you know, I don't know, like a pancake. It can, you know, and so they're learning. They're like, wait a minute. Like, I like this one. This one's cool to me. And so it's like, well, you can't say that you don't like octopuses now. And so it's just giving them that nuance. And I think for the longest time within media, there was zero to little nuance. And I think within this new age of social media, I can be as nuanced as I want. And if you look at my captions on Instagram, I maxed them out at 2,200 characters, every single one of them. And there was a lot of times where people would say, no one's reading your captions. And so I started doing these things at the end of my captions. And for those of you who follow OctoNation, you've seen it. I'll say, comment this if you read this far. And you'll see that we have hundreds and hundreds of comments of people saying that key word because they want to tell me that they're reading the information. And that shows you that they're reading the information. And so I have all these signals kind of built in to see whether or not I'm either boring people or getting them to want to learn more. And so it's just been really fun kind of like being able to do science communication at scale
Yeah.
and get feedback on the effectiveness of it.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really important too. I get a lot of people too talking about, oh, you're talking about the ocean all the time. People aren't listening, and then I'll get people, interacting with me online, just being like, hey, I'm so happy you did this. This actually made me go back and do a PhD, or it made me go do this. It really made me feel better about the ocean and things like that. So I continue to listen. I find a lot of people will be like, oh, you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do that, but you set your own tone, right? I think if you lead with passion, right, and consistency, somebody's out there who's going to be reading those captions. They may read the first paragraph, they may read the entire thing, but somebody's going to read it and they're going to get value out of it. And obviously you're being rewarded by that, by just showing, people showing like, yes, I am reading it, please continue. It's basically what they're saying is, please continue giving me this great information, because I read it all the way and it's something that I enjoy.
And I think people too in marketing, what they don't realize, and I think nonprofits, they try to make just everybody happy. And I was very clear in the beginning when I started OctoNation that yes, we want everybody to learn from us, but we're also not for everybody, from the standpoint of, if you are like anti, accredited aquariums, if you think Aquarius like is a capitalist plague on society and you think they should all drain the tanks and things like that, that's just something that is not a core value of ours. We believe that they're on the front lines of ocean conservation. It's oftentimes thankless work. And so our community is not a place in which you'll ever feel comfortable shaming an aquarist in our community.
Right.
And so all throughout, of building OctoNation, we came up to these crossroads of people really wanting it to be something else. And so I, as the leader of it, had to establish firm guidelines and saying, oh, actually, we don't do that here. There's a lot of people who wanted OctoNation to be like an animal rights organization. I'm just like, our job is to inspire wonder of the ocean by educating the world about octopuses. Can our work be used by animal rights activists to go out there and educate? Yes, but that's not the function that we serve as an educational nonprofit institution. So it's just understanding, like really knowing yourself and knowing your values and all of that, and making sure that when people come in to try to change it or make it, like, I don't know, you just kind of have to have that I don't know, framework in place. So I guess that leadership ability to say diplomatically, I see where you're coming from, but that's not the purpose of our organization.
100%. And I think it's great to sort of lay out what you're about, for that people can get, because you're right, you're not for everybody. But there you are for a lot of people. People want to learn. They need to learn, especially with a species or a type of species where you just don't know much about. None of us know enough about. I mean, as you mentioned, we're still discovering species as we explore the depths of the ocean. We're still seeing these adorable, cute little, I think they dub them Dumbo octopus and things like that, where they're just absolutely adorable. And there's so many more species that we could find and then discover. It's necessary to have places like OctoNation online to be able to share that and to be able to put all that time into it. Now I assume it's a full-time gig and you're doing this quite often, but you're using all of the skills that you built up through your experience to basically advocate as octopuses as the influencer of today, for the animals. And I think that's really great. This is a conservation podcast. We talk about how to protect the ocean. Are there issues that keep coming up that are common to like threats to octopus that you would like people to know?
We get asked that a lot. And I once gave a talk at a school, and a little girl, age 9, came up to me and said, I really want to help the octopus. Right. Tell me what I can do. And I told her that there's no charity that benefits octopuses, and so little is known about them that we don't know of any species that's actually endangered. But I told her, anything you do to protect the ocean is going to help octopuses. Well, that little girl, her name is Heidi Bell, and she walked out of that room and instantly went home and started making octopus-themed jewelry and sea turtle-themed jewelry, and making these beautiful cloth bags that you can bring your groceries home in, and started selling them with little cards that would tell interesting facts about the ocean. And she also became enamored of sea turtles. That 9-year-old raised thousands of dollars, which she gave to New England Aquarium, and she donated it specifically to their sea turtle hospital in Quincy. And that's one 9-year-old.
Yeah.
So it's our hope, I think, that the octopus becomes an ambassador for the entire ocean.
Yeah.
And if you have, no matter what talent you might have, if your talent is art or photography or writing, if your talent is dance or finance or marine biology, there's something you can do that will continue to deepen our awe and our desire to protect what most of our planet is composed of, and that is the ocean.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's always interesting because the people I have on here, when I first started this podcast, was a lot of friends that I've known through being a marine biologist. So a lot of them were marine biologists. They were scientists. And then it slowly started to expand. We had marketing specialists and executives and companies that sell insurance that want to help protect the ocean and all this kind of stuff that are doing amazing things, for the ocean, whether it's to inspire, whether it's to help protect, whether it's to bring their employees out and enjoy, some time, protecting the ocean to make them feel better and do a team building exercise as well. It's unreal how many people can get involved and how many people don't realize it, and I find having, people who are in marketing, writers on the podcast like yourselves to come on the podcast and show what you've done, and show the passion that you have. Just, I feel like it helps inspire the people in my audience, like the listeners to this podcast, because you guys have done it, and you continue to do it. And there's really no ceiling to what you're doing. And I think it's unreal. So I want to thank you both for coming on. Now, the book is called Secrets of the Octopus. And I assume you can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, basically, as you mentioned, Warren, everywhere you find books. So please go out and get. Is it on sale? It's on sale right now, right?
Yeah. So it published March 19th. So it's available everywhere books are sold. Yeah. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If you're a local bookstore person, you can order it directly from them. But yeah, I just recently saw the translation into Japanese. So my species profiles, I'm like, oh my gosh, they look like really cool. Like, I don't know, it looks incredible. So I'm looking forward to seeing what impact just the knowledge about all these 16 profiles they bring on. And I know it's gonna make people curious about what other ones, like, because we were talking about, it's just the tip of the iceberg. You have the Antarctic octopus that has antifreeze proteins in its skin, hot water volcano octopus that can survive like 200-degree hydrothermal vents. And so everywhere in the ocean, there's an octopus there that has been figuring it out for hundreds of millions of years. So it's pretty interesting.
Well, you can never be uninterested with octopuses, in my opinion. I'm sure you guys share the same thing. Now you're also doing a book tour, correct? Can you just name some dates that you're going to be and where you're going to be?
So we'll be in Mystic, Connecticut on the 28th. We'll be at Aquarium of the Pacific on the 3rd. And more tour dates are popping up as we go along. But we keep everybody typically up to date through OctoNation or through Sy Montgomery's website.
Awesome. So I'll put those links in our show notes so that people can get access to it, so they can hopefully meet you in person. But go get the book. I'm going to put a link to Amazon so they can get that as well. Warren and Sy, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate the work that you're doing for Octopuses and writing and inspiring people. It is so great to see. You're inspiring myself as well. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming on the podcast and look forward to having you back again.
Boy, well, thank you for your podcast and the work that you are doing to protect our oceans.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Andrew.
that. Thank you, Sy, and thank you, Warren, for joining us here on the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. It was great to have you on to be able to speak about the book, the new book, The Secrets of the Octopus by National Geographic. You can go get that at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you get your favorite books. I'll put a link to Amazon in the show notes below, or the show notes where you can check it out. And also go visit OctoNation and be a part of the conversations, be a part of the education, see those beautiful photos on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, all the places where you can watch and look at content about octopus. It is wonderful to be able to learn about these amazing animals. And as Warren has mentioned, we're still discovering things about the octopus. And once you think you know the octopus, a new species comes around and you just find out something completely different or completely new. And it's amazing. So check those out. And again, thank you so much to Sy and Warren for joining us and sharing their love and passion for the octopus, as well as their work around the octopus. And they're on book tours. So get to see this as soon as possible, or get to see them in person as soon as possible, and thank them for their book and for coming on the podcast. If you see them and you've listened to this podcast, please let me know. All right, or let them know that we sent you there. Okay. But thank you again for joining us on today's episode. If you have any questions or comments about the episode, please let me know. All you have to do is just DM me on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean, and you can sign up for our newsletter, speakupforblue.com/newsletter. Pretty easy to sign up. speakupforblue.com/newsletter. Thank you again for joining us on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.